The industrial kitchen at Fort Blackstone hummed with the mechanical efficiency of feeding 3,000 soldiers. But Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez moved through the chaos like she was conducting a symphony. Steam rose from massive steel pots, while the dinner rush created a cacophony of clanging metal, shouted orders, and the endless shuffle of boots across worn linoleum. Maria wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of flour across her dark skin as she checked the temperature on the evening's roast beef. Around her, junior cooks scrambled to keep pace with the relentless demand of hungry soldiers streaming through the chow line. "Hey Vasquez, you missed a spot on table 12, called out Corporal Jenkins, a skinny kid from Ohio who'd been assigned to kitchen duty as punishment for falling asleep during guard rotation. His voice carried the particular brand of mockery reserved for those who thought mess hall duty was beneath real military work. Jenkins pointed toward a barely visible water spot on one of the metal tables, his smirk suggesting he'd found it specifically to give Maria grief. Maria didn't look up from the industrial mixer, where she was preparing tomorrow's bread dough. 3 years of working in this kitchen had taught her that responding to every petty comment would leave her with no energy for the work that actually mattered. She'd learned to pick her battles carefully, saving her words for moments when they could make a real difference. The mixer's heavy motor drowned out most of Jenkins' continued commentary about how someone with real military experience wouldn't be stuck flipping pancakes for a living. "That's Staff Sergeant Vasquez to you, Corporal," said Private Martinez, a young woman from Texas who'd been working alongside Maria for 6 months. Martinez had quickly learned to respect the quiet competence that Maria brought to every task, from planning meal logistics for field exercises to maintaining equipment that other facilities would have replaced years ago. There was something about the way Maria handled crisis situations that suggested capabilities far beyond food service. Though she never spoke about her background before the kitchen assignment, the evening rush intensified as soldiers from the Fago base's various units converged on the mess hall. Maria coordinated the flow with subtle efficiency, adjusting portions to ensure everyone would be fed while maintaining quality standards that exceeded anything the troops had experienced at previous postings. She'd somehow managed to transform institutional military food into meals that soldiers actually looked forward to, using creativity and resourcefulness that turned basic ingredients into something approaching home cooking. Captain Bradley Thompson strode into the kitchen area, his pristine uniform and condescending expression marking him as one of those officers who viewed support personnel as invisible servants. Thompson commanded the base's logistics battalion but had never served in a combat zone, a fact that was obvious to anyone who'd actually seen action overseas. His authority came from paperwork and procedure rather than earned respect, and he wielded both like weapons against anyone he considered beneath his notice. "Vasquez, we're having supply issues with next week's delivery," Thompson announced without preamble, dropping a stack of requisition forms on the stainless steel prep counter where Maria was working. "I need you to make these numbers work with whatever scraps the supply sergeant can scrounge up, and try to keep the complaints to a minimum this time. Some of us have real military responsibilities to worry about." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. It really helps the channel grow. Maria glanced at the paperwork, her experienced eye immediately recognizing the impossibility of what Thompson was requesting. The numbers didn't add up to feed the base's population for more than 4 days, and the protein allocations were so far below military nutritional standards that soldiers would be operating at reduced effectiveness within a week. Someone had either made serious errors in the procurement process or was deliberately creating an impossible situation. "Sir, these quantities won't support current personnel levels," Maria said calmly, keeping her tone respectful despite the obvious setup for failure. "We'll need at least 30% more protein and double the vegetable allocations to maintain proper nutrition standards." I can provide alternative menu planning that would stretch the budget while meeting nutritional requirements. Thompson's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Alternative menu planning. This is the military, not some fancy restaurant. Soldiers eat what they're given, and kitchen staff follow orders instead of playing amateur nutritionist. Maybe if you spent less time pretending to be something you're not, and more time focusing on actual cooking, we wouldn't have these problems. The kitchen fell silent except for the constant hum of industrial equipment. Several junior staff members stopped their work to watch the confrontation, recognizing the tension that had been building for weeks between Thompson's increasingly unreasonable demands and Maria's quiet professionalism. Private Martinez stepped closer to Maria, ready to provide support if the situation escalated further. Maria's hands never stopped moving as she continued kneading the bread dough, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Years of military training had taught her to maintain composure under pressure, but those same years had also taught her to recognize when authority figures were operating beyond their competence. Thompson's dismissive attitude wasn't just insulting. It was dangerous when applied to logistical planning that directly affected troop readiness. "Of course, sir," Maria replied evenly. "I'll make it work with what we have available." Thompson nodded with satisfaction, apparently convinced that he'd successfully put an insubordinate cook in her place. He gathered up the paperwork and strode toward the kitchen exit, already dismissing the conversation from his mind. At the doorway, he paused and looked back with the particular smile of someone who enjoyed exercising petty authority. "Oh, and Vasquez," Thompson added with deliberate casualness, "I've heard some of the troops making jokes about your little tattoos. Might want to consider more professional appearance standards. This is a military installation, not some biker bar." The comment hung in the air as Thompson disappeared into the corridor, leaving behind the kind of silence that follows an unnecessary cruelty. Maria's tattoos were always covered by her uniform sleeves during duty hours, visible only during the brief moments when she rolled up her sleeves for particularly messy prep work. What Thompson couldn't know was that those tattoos represented 8 years of active duty service in some of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan, including coordinates from operations that remained classified. Years after her discharge, Private Martinez moved closer to Maria, her young face flushed with anger at Thompson's casual disrespect. "Staff Sergeant, that was completely out of line. You could file a complaint about his behavior toward support personnel." Maria continued working the dough, her movements steady and methodical despite the tension in her shoulders. "Martinez, what do you know about reading topographical coordinates?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, causing Martinez to blink in confusion. "Basic land navigation, like everyone learns in basic training." "Why?" "Because," Maria said quietly, "sometimes the most important information is hidden in plain sight, and people only see what they expect to see." The cryptic comment left Martinez even more puzzled, but she recognized the tone that meant Maria was processing something far beyond the immediate situation. Over the months they'd worked together, Martinez had noticed that Maria approached problems with a systematic precision that seemed more suited to military planning than meal preparation. There were moments when Maria's eyes would take on a distant focus, as if she was calculating variables and outcomes that existed far beyond the kitchen walls. The dinner rush continued around them, but the kitchen's atmosphere had shifted. Word of Thompson's confrontation spread quickly among the staff, adding another layer of tension to an already challenging work environment. Maria's quiet leadership had earned genuine respect from the junior personnel, and seeing her treated with such casual disrespect struck them as fundamentally wrong. As the evening wore on, Maria threw herself into the complex logistics of stretching insufficient supplies across too many meals. She worked with the focused intensity of someone solving a puzzle with life or death consequences, though to outside observers it looked like nothing more than creative menu planning. Her notebook filled with calculations, alternative protein sources, and timing schedules that would maximize nutrition while minimizing costs. Maria's real attention was focused on a problem far more serious than food rationing. Thompson's supply numbers didn't just represent incompetence. They suggested something more deliberate. The patterns reminded her of logistical manipulation she'd seen in Afghanistan, where corrupt officials would create artificial shortages to cover their involvement in black market operations. The thought that such corruption might be occurring on an American military base filled her with cold anger. The kitchen finally quieted as the last soldiers finished their meals and the cleaning crews began their nightly routine. Maria stayed late, as she often did, ostensibly to prepare for the next day's service, but actually to think through problems that required solitude and concentration. The massive industrial space felt different in the evening hours, less chaotic but somehow more intense, as if the weight of responsibility settled more heavily in the silence. Private Martinez approached hesitantly, recognizing Maria's need for space but unwilling to leave without offering support. "Staff Sergeant, is there anything I can do to help with tomorrow's planning?" Maria looked up from her notebook, her expression thoughtful rather than troubled. "Martinez, how well do you know the base's communication protocols? The procedures for reporting irregularities up the chain of command? Standard procedures, I guess." "Why? Are you thinking about filing a complaint about Captain Thompson?" "I'm thinking," Maria said slowly, "that sometimes problems run deeper than personality conflicts. And sometimes the people who seem powerless are actually in the best position to see what's really happening." Martinez nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what Maria meant. Over the months, she'd learned that Maria's observations often proved more insightful than they initially appeared. There was something about her approach to problems that suggested experience with situations far more complex than kitchen management. As the base settled into its nightly routine, Maria remained in the kitchen, surrounded by the tools of her current trade, but thinking about skills and knowledge that had nothing to do with food service. The coordinates tattooed on her left arm marked locations where she'd called in airstrikes, coordinated medical evacuations, and gathered intelligence that had saved dozens of American lives. Those numbers represented 8 years of service as a forward observer with the 82nd Airborne, work that had earned her commendations and the quiet respect of special operations units. But that was before the injury that had ended her combat career and left her with limited options for continued military service. The transition to food service had seemed like a practical choice, a way to serve her remaining years while staying in the military environment that had become her home. What she hadn't anticipated was how difficult it would be to watch incompetence and potential corruption while being dismissed as just another cook who didn't understand real military operations. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same people who mocked her current assignment would have been grateful for her expertise if they'd encountered her in Afghanistan. But institutional memory was short, and combat veterans who took support roles often found their previous experience ignored or forgotten. Maria had accepted this reality with the same pragmatic determination that had served her through 8 years of dangerous deployments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she attempted to feed 3,000 soldiers with supplies that couldn't adequately support half that number. But tonight, as she finalized her plans and prepared to lock up the kitchen, Maria was thinking about patterns, possibilities, and the uncomfortable feeling that Captain Thompson's supply problems might be connected to something far more serious than simple incompetence. The coordinates on her arm seemed to pulse with remembered significance as she turned off the kitchen lights and headed toward her quarters. Those numbers had once been her lifeline to support and safety. Now they were hidden beneath uniform sleeves, invisible to people who saw only a mess hall cook. But coordinates, like memories, remained accurate regardless of who was reading them. And Maria had a feeling that both would soon become relevant in ways that no one at Fort Blackstone could anticipate. The alarm at 0430 hours cut through the pre-dawn darkness of Fort Blackstone like a blade. But Maria Vasquez was already awake. She'd been staring at the ceiling of her small quarters for the past hour, her mind working through the impossible mathematics of Captain Thompson's supply allocations. 8 years of combat deployments had trained her body to function on minimal sleep, but her brain refused to shut down when faced with logistical problems that didn't add up. Maria's quarters reflected the Spartan efficiency of someone who'd learned to live out of a duffel bag for most of her adult life. A single desk held her laptop, a stack of culinary certification books, and a framed photograph of her old unit from Afghanistan. 12 soldiers in desert camouflage, their faces bearing the particular intensity of people who'd survived situations that others wouldn't understand. She was the only woman in the photo, and the only one whose current assignment bore no resemblance to their specialized training. The shower water ran cold, as it always did in the enlisted quarters, but Maria had experienced worse conditions. She'd once gone 3 weeks without a proper shower during a forward observation mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains, calling in artillery strikes while living in a hide position that barely qualified as shelter. The memory made her current accommodation seem luxurious by comparison, though she kept such perspectives to herself around younger soldiers who complained about base amenities. Maria, dressed in her standard duty uniform, the sleeves carefully adjusted to cover the intricate tattoos that marked her left arm from wrist to shoulder. The designs appeared decorative to casual observers, geometric patterns interwoven with stylized mountain landscapes that could have come from any tattoo parlor catering to military personnel. But hidden within the artistic elements were precise coordinate notations, elevation markers, and range calculations that represented 8 years of operations in some of Afghanistan's most contested territory. The walk to the mess hall took her past the base's memorial wall, where black granite panels listed the names of soldiers from Fort Blackstone who'd been killed in action over the past 2 decades. Maria paused, as she did every morning, to read the names of 3 men from her old unit who wouldn't be returning from their final deployment. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Corporal Williams, and Private First Class Chen had died when their convoy hit an improvised explosive device 6 months after Maria's medical discharge, an event that still visited her dreams with unwelcome regularity. "You're early again, Staff Sergeant," observed Sergeant First Class David Park, the mess hall's night supervisor, who was finishing his shift as Maria arrived. Park was a career soldier with 22 years of service, most of it spent in various support roles that had given him a deep appreciation for competent personnel, regardless of their current assignment. He'd worked with enough combat veterans to recognize the subtle signs that marked someone who'd seen serious action. "Can't sleep when the numbers don't work," Maria replied, unlocking the kitchen's main entrance and switching on the industrial lighting that revealed the massive space where she'd spend the next 14 hours. "Thompson's supply allocations are going to create problems that go way beyond meal quality." Park followed her into the kitchen, his expression troubled. As night supervisor, he'd overheard conversations among the base's senior staff that suggested Thompson's logistics problems were becoming a source of concern at higher levels. "I've been hearing rumors that several other bases are experiencing similar supply shortfalls. Could be a systemic issue rather than local incompetence." Maria began her morning routine of checking equipment temperatures, inventory levels, and the detailed prep schedules that would guide her staff through another complex day of feeding thousands of soldiers. Her movements had the fluid efficiency of someone who'd learned to maximize every action, whether she was operating a field radio under enemy fire or managing industrial kitchen equipment during a breakfast rush. "Park, what do you know about the base's communication protocols for reporting supply irregularities?" Maria asked while inspecting the walk-in refrigeration units. "Specifically, procedures for documenting patterns that might indicate problems beyond normal logistics." "That's an oddly specific question for someone whose job description doesn't include supply chain analysis," Park observed, though his tone carried curiosity rather than suspicion. "You thinking about going over Thompson's head?" "I'm thinking about doing my job properly," Maria replied, pulling out her notebook to record temperature readings and inventory discrepancies, which includes making sure soldiers get adequate nutrition to maintain combat readiness. Park watched Maria work with the systematic precision that had impressed him since her arrival at Fort Blackstone. Unlike many personnel who viewed mess hall duty as a temporary assignment to be endured, Maria approached every task with professional intensity that suggested deeper motivations. She'd transformed the base's food service from a source of constant complaints to something approaching excellence. Using skills that seemed to extend far beyond culinary training, the first of Maria's staff began arriving at 0500, starting with Private Martinez and the other early shift personnel responsible for breakfast preparation. Maria had developed a training program that emphasized efficiency, quality, and the kind of attention to detail that military operations demanded. Her staff respected her not just for her competence, but for the way she protected them from the petty harassment that support personnel often faced from line units. "Good morning, Staff Sergeant," Martinez said, tying on her apron and checking the prep schedules that Maria had posted for the day. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about information being hidden in plain sight. Were you talking about something specific?" Maria looked up from the industrial mixer where she was preparing batter for the morning's pancakes. Martinez's question touched on observations that had been troubling her for weeks: patterns in supply deliveries, personnel assignments, and resource allocations that didn't match the base's stated operational requirements. But discussing such concerns with junior personnel could be seen as undermining command authority, a charge that could end her military career. "Martinez, what's your background before the Army?" Maria asked instead, deflecting the question while gathering information about her subordinate's potential capabilities. 2 years of community college, business administration focus, Martinez replied, beginning her own morning prep work. "I was planning to finish my degree after my enlistment, maybe work in logistics or supply chain management." "Why?" "Because," Maria said carefully, "good logistics people notice when numbers don't add up. And sometimes the people closest to the actual operations see things that desk officers miss." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Corporal Jenkins and the rest of the morning shift, their attitudes ranging from professional competence to barely concealed resentment at their current assignment. Jenkins had made no secret of his belief that mess hall duty was beneath someone with his infantry training, though his actual combat experience consisted entirely of training exercises conducted in controlled environments. "Another day in paradise," Jenkins announced with theatrical sarcasm, surveying the kitchen with the expression of someone forced to endure conditions beneath his dignity. "I heard Thompson's cutting our supply budget again. Hope you've got some magic tricks to make nothing into something, Vasquez." Maria continued her work without responding to Jenkins' commentary. She'd learned that engaging with his complaints only encouraged more elaborate displays of dissatisfaction, and she had neither the time nor the energy for managing his attitude problems. The breakfast rush would begin in 2 hours, and feeding 3,000 soldiers required coordination that left no room for personality conflicts. "Jenkins, you're on serving line duty today," Maria announced, checking her staff assignments. "Martinez, I need you handling inventory management and supply reconciliation. Everyone else, standard rotation." "Serving line?" Jenkins protested. "Come on, Vasquez, that's grunt work. I've got infantry training, not food service experience." "And yet," Maria replied with pointed calm, "you're assigned to food service. So today you'll learn how serving line operations contribute to overall mission success." The exchange illustrated the daily challenge of managing personnel who viewed their current assignment as punishment rather than opportunity. Maria had dealt with similar attitude problems throughout her military career, though usually in contexts where the stakes were high enough to focus. everyone's attention on collective success rather than individual grievances. As the morning progressed and breakfast preparation moved into full swing, Maria found herself thinking about the larger patterns that had been troubling her. Thompson's supply reductions were part of a broader trend that suggested either systematic incompetence or deliberate manipulation of resources. Her experience in Afghanistan had taught her to recognize the signs of corruption and black market operations, and several indicators were becoming impossible to ignore. The breakfast rush began with the controlled chaos that Maria had learned to orchestrate like a complex military operation. Soldiers streamed through the serving lines while her staff maintained the efficient flow that kept wait times minimal and food quality high. Maria moved between stations, adjusting portions, monitoring temperatures, and maintaining the standards that had earned Fort Blackstone's mess hall a reputation for excellence among regional military installations. But even during the busiest periods, part of her attention remained focused on the troubling patterns that went far beyond food service. The coordinates tattooed on her arm represented skills and knowledge that had nothing to do with her current assignment, but everything to do with recognizing threats and calling for appropriate responses. Those capabilities remained dormant beneath her cook's uniform, invisible to people who saw only what they expected to see. The weekly staff meeting convened in the mess hall's cramped administrative office at 1400 hours, with Captain Thompson presiding over an assembly of support personnel who represented the invisible backbone of Fort Blackstone's operations. Maria sat in the back row alongside other non-commissioned officers, her notebook open to a page filled with detailed calculations about supply shortfalls and nutritional deficiencies that would affect combat readiness within days. Thompson strode into the room with the self-important bearing of someone who confused authority with competence, his uniform pressed to parade ground standards despite never having served in a combat zone. He carried a leather portfolio that contained what he considered strategic planning documents, though Maria recognized them as basic spreadsheets that any competent logistics specialist could have prepared in an afternoon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson began with theatrical formality, "we're facing budgetary constraints that require creative solutions and innovative thinking. The base commander has made it clear that support operations must demonstrate fiscal responsibility while maintaining acceptable service levels." Maria studied Thompson's presentation materials, noting immediately that his budget projections were based on flawed assumptions about consumption rates, nutritional requirements, and basic mathematics. The numbers he was proposing would create protein deficiency severe enough to affect soldiers' physical performance and cognitive function, problems that would cascade through every aspect of base operations. "Sir," Maria said, raising her hand, with military courtesy, "I've prepared alternative budget scenarios that maintain nutritional standards while achieving the required cost reductions. With modified menu planning and strategic sourcing adjustments, we can meet both fiscal and operational requirements." Thompson's expression shifted to the particular brand of irritation reserved for subordinates who dared to offer expertise that exceeded their presumed qualifications. He glanced at Maria's notebook with dismissive curiosity, as if the detailed calculations were elaborate doodles rather than professional analysis. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Thompson said with exaggerated patience, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but budget planning requires understanding of factors beyond kitchen operations. These decisions involve procurement regulations, vendor negotiations, and strategic considerations that support personnel aren't equipped to evaluate." The condescending tone was calculated to establish hierarchical distance while undermining Maria's credibility in front of her peers. Several other NCOs shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the unnecessary humiliation but unwilling to challenge an officer's authority in an official setting. Maria felt the familiar anger that came from being dismissed by someone whose competence was demonstrably inferior to her own. "Of course, sir," Maria replied evenly, keeping her voice professionally neutral despite the deliberate insult. I was simply offering operational perspective on how these budget constraints would affect mission readiness. Mission readiness? Thompson laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. Vasquez, your mission is preparing meals, not strategic planning. Perhaps if you focused on your actual responsibilities instead of playing amateur analyst, we wouldn't have soldiers complaining about food quality. The accusation was particularly galling because Maria knew that soldier satisfaction with mess hall food had increased dramatically since her arrival at Fort Blackstone. Monthly surveys consistently showed approval ratings that exceeded every other base in the region, achievements that Thompson regularly took credit for in his reports to higher command. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the senior NCO responsible for base maintenance operations, cleared his throat diplomatically. Sir, with respect, Staff Sergeant Vasquez has consistently delivered exceptional results in food service operations. Her input on logistics might be valuable, given her experience managing complex supply chains. Thompson's eyes narrowed at what he perceived as insubordination from another support staff member. Rodriguez was a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments, but his current assignment placed him firmly within Thompson's sphere of authority, making any challenge to that authority a potential career risk. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Thompson said with deliberate formality, I'm sure everyone here appreciates Staff Sergeant Vasquez's dedication to her duties. However, there's a difference between following orders effectively and attempting to operate beyond one's area of expertise. Maria watched the exchange with growing frustration, recognizing the power dynamics that allowed incompetence to flourish, while competence was systematically suppressed. Thompson's approach to leadership relied on maintaining strict hierarchical barriers that prevented information from flowing upward, particularly when that information contradicted his predetermined conclusions. Sir, Maria tried again, her voice carefully controlled. The supply allocations you're proposing will create nutritional deficiencies that affect cognitive performance and physical endurance. I have documentation showing how similar reductions at other installations resulted in decreased training scores and increased medical issues. Thompson's face flushed with anger at Maria's persistence. He stepped closer to her position, using his physical presence to emphasize the power differential between commissioned officer and enlisted personnel. The intimidation tactic was crude but effective in most military contexts, where challenging officer authority carried significant professional risks. Documentation? Thompson's voice carried theatrical skepticism. Staff Sergeant, where exactly did you acquire expertise in nutritional science and military training performance? Did they teach strategic analysis in cooking school? The question was designed to humiliate Maria by reducing her military service to vocational training, implying that her current assignment represented the full extent of her qualifications. Several attendees looked uncomfortable with Thompson's aggressive approach, but military culture discouraged intervention in conflicts between officers and subordinates. Maria felt the weight of 8 years of combat experience pressing against her uniform sleeves, hidden beneath fabric that concealed coordinates from operations Thompson couldn't imagine. She'd called in artillery strikes that saved entire companies, coordinated medical evacuations under enemy fire, and gathered intelligence that contributed to strategic decisions affecting thousands of soldiers. But those accomplishments existed in a different context, invisible to people who saw only her current assignment. My documentation comes from standard military nutrition guidelines and medical research available through official channels, Maria replied with careful precision. The same sources that inform meal planning at installations worldwide. Official channels, Thompson repeated mockingly. How convenient that a mess hall cook has become an expert on official military policy. Tell me, Vasquez, do you also have opinions about weapons procurement, personnel management, and strategic planning? Perhaps the base commander should consult with you before making major decisions. The sarcasm was intended to position Maria as someone with delusions of competence. Beyond her station, Thompson was using the classic technique for discrediting subordinates who possessed inconvenient expertise, portraying their knowledge as presumptuous overreach rather than legitimate professional capability. Sergeant First Class Park, who had worked with Maria long enough to recognize her unusual competence, attempted to provide support without directly challenging Thompson's authority. Sir, Staff Sergeant Vasquez has consistently demonstrated exceptional analytical skills in managing complex logistics operations. Her insights might be worth considering. Thompson turned his attention to Park with the expression of someone whose patience was being deliberately tested. Sergeant Park, I'm beginning to detect a pattern of support personnel who seem confused about their roles and responsibilities. Perhaps we need additional training on appropriate boundaries between enlisted duties and officer decision-making. The threat was subtle but clear. Continued support for Maria's position would result in negative consequences for anyone willing to validate her expertise. Thompson was using his authority to create an environment where competence became a liability rather than an asset. Ensuring that his decisions wouldn't face informed criticism, Maria recognized the futility of continuing the discussion within Thompson's framework. Years of military service had taught her to identify situations where persistence would only strengthen opposition while accomplishing nothing productive. But the knowledge that soldiers would suffer from Thompson's incompetence made retreat particularly bitter. Of course, sir, Maria said with formal submission. I'll focus on implementing your budget requirements as efficiently as possible. Thompson smiled with satisfaction, apparently convinced that he'd successfully established proper hierarchical relationships. He returned to his presentation materials, dismissing Maria's concerns as definitively resolved through the application of appropriate authority. Excellent, Thompson continued. Now, as I was saying, these budget adjustments represent an opportunity for support operations to demonstrate flexibility and innovation. I'm confident that our personnel will rise to meet these challenges through dedication and creative problem-solving. Maria listened to Thompson's continued platitudes while calculating the real-world impact of his decisions. Within a week, soldiers would be consuming meals that failed to meet basic nutritional requirements. Within 2 weeks, the effects would begin appearing in training performance, medical statistics, and operational readiness metrics. But by then, Thompson would have moved on to other projects, leaving support personnel to manage the consequences of his strategic planning. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering routine administrative matters that could have been handled through standard communication channels. Thompson seemed to enjoy the captive audience, using the gathering as an opportunity to demonstrate his authority over personnel, who had no choice but to listen respectfully to his pronouncements. When the meeting finally concluded, Maria remained seated as other attendees filed out of the cramped office. She needed a moment to process the frustration and anger that Thompson's performance had generated, emotions that could interfere with her ability to function effectively in the challenging days ahead. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached her position, his expression sympathetic but cautious. Vasquez, you know he's wrong about the budget numbers, but pushing harder won't change anything. Sometimes you have to work around incompetent leadership instead of trying to fix it directly. Maria nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Rodriguez's advice while struggling with the knowledge that working around Thompson's incompetence would require accepting consequences that could have been prevented through proper planning. The coordinates on her arm seemed to pulse with remembered urgency, reminding her of situations where the cost of leadership failures was measured in lives rather than meal quality. 4. The inciting incident, the first explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0347 hours, sending shockwaves through Fort Blackstone's main administration building and triggering every alarm system on the base. Maria jolted awake in her quarters as emergency klaxons wailed across the installation, their urgent rhythm indicating a real threat rather than scheduled training exercises. Years of combat experience kicked in automatically, her body moving toward her gear before her conscious mind had fully processed what was happening. The second explosion followed, 23 seconds later, closer to the enlisted quarters and powerful enough to rattle windows throughout the residential section. Maria pulled on her boots while listening to the controlled chaos of soldiers, responding to an attack on American soil, something that wasn't supposed to happen at a stateside installation equipped with multiple security perimeters and constant surveillance systems. Her tactical radio crackled to life with fragmented reports from various units, attempting to establish situational awareness in the darkness. Base security to all stations. We have multiple breach points along the eastern perimeter. Unknown number of hostiles, unknown weapons capabilities. All personnel implement lockdown procedures immediately. Maria grabbed her gear and moved toward the mess hall, her mind automatically shifting into the operational mode that had kept her alive through dozens of combat situations in Afghanistan. The base's emergency response protocols called for support personnel to secure their assigned areas and await further instructions. But Maria's experience told her that generic procedures rarely matched the reality of dynamic tactical situations. The communications building erupted in flames as she crossed the central courtyard, the orange glow revealing figures in dark tactical gear, moving with military precision through areas they shouldn't have been able to access. These weren't random terrorists or local criminals. They were professional soldiers conducting the coordinated assault with intimate knowledge of Fort Blackstone's layout and defensive systems. "All units, this is Base Command," came a strained voice over the emergency frequency. "We have confirmed hostile forces inside the perimeter. Unknown objectives, unknown force strength. Implement defensive positions and prepare for sustained engagement." Maria reached the mess hall and found Private Martinez already there, her young face pale with fear but her movement steady as she followed emergency protocols. The massive kitchen complex had been designated as a potential casualty collection point during base planning exercises, its large open spaces and multiple access routes making it suitable for medical operations if the main hospital became compromised. "Staff. Sergeant, what's happening?" Martinez asked, her voice tight with controlled panic. "The explosions. Are we under attack?" "We're under attack," Maria confirmed, checking the facility's multiple entrances and noting several tactical vulnerabilities that peacetime operations had never addressed. Professional soldiers, not random hostiles. They know this base's layout and security procedures. The observation was troubling for reasons beyond immediate tactical concerns. Fort Blackstone's security protocols were classified information, available only to personnel with appropriate clearance levels and specific operational requirements. The attacking force's apparent knowledge suggested either extraordinary intelligence gathering or insider assistance from someone with legitimate access to base plans. Maria's radio received another fragmented transmission. "Command post under heavy fire. Multiple casualties reported. Medical personnel respond to grid coordinates 234567. Repeat, medical emergency at command post." The coordinates triggered recognition that made Maria's blood run cold. Grid reference 234567 corresponded to the base's primary communication center, the facility responsible for coordinating with higher command and requesting external support. If the attackers had targeted communications first, they were following textbook assault doctrine designed to isolate the base from outside assistance. "Martinez, I need you to help me secure the kitchen entrances," Maria said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders under extreme pressure. "Use the prep tables to create barriers and make sure all exterior lighting is disabled. We don't want to provide targeting references for anyone outside." As they worked to fortify their position, Maria's mind processed tactical information with the systematic efficiency that 8 years of combat operations had ingrained. The attacker's timing suggested coordination with someone who understood base schedules and personnel patterns. The target selection indicated objectives beyond random destruction. They were hitting specific facilities with strategic importance. The distinctive chatter of automatic weapons fire echoed across the base as defending forces engaged the assault teams. Maria recognized the sound patterns of different weapon systems, noting that the attackers were using military-grade equipment rather than civilian firearms. This was definitely not a spontaneous attack by local extremists. It was a planned military operation conducted by professionals with significant resources. Staff Sergeant Martinez said urgently, "Should we try to reach the main command post? They might need additional personnel for medical support." Maria checked her watch and calculated distances between their current position and the reported combat zones. Moving across open ground during an active firefight would expose them to unnecessary risk, but staying isolated in the mess hall might mean missing opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the base's defense. Her tactical radio crackled with a new transmission that changed everything. "All stations, this is Colonel Harrison. Base communications are compromised. Unknown hostiles have penetrated our security network and may be monitoring standard frequencies. All units switch to backup communication protocols immediately." The announcement confirmed Maria's growing suspicion that this attack involved more than external assault teams. Someone with access to Fort Blackstone's communication systems was providing real-time intelligence to the attacking force, allowing them to anticipate defensive responses and counter military tactics that should have been effective against external threats. "Martinez, do you know anything about the base's backup communication systems?" Maria asked while continuing to monitor radio traffic for useful intelligence about the tactical situation. "Basic emergency procedures," Martinez replied. "Why? Are you thinking about trying to establish contact with outside agencies?" Before Maria could answer, the mess hall's main lights went out, plunging the facility into darkness, except for the orange glow from fires burning throughout the base. The power outage was either the result of combat damage or a deliberate action by someone with knowledge of the electrical systems, another indication that the attackers possessed inside information about critical infrastructure. Maria activated a small tactical flashlight, its red filter preserving night vision while providing enough illumination for basic navigation. The emergency lighting should have activated automatically when main power failed, but the backup systems appeared to be non-functional, suggesting sabotage rather than combat damage. "Martinez, I need you to stay here and monitor the radio frequencies," Maria said, making a decision that drew on capabilities she'd kept hidden since arriving at Fort Blackstone. "If anyone tries to use this facility as a casualty collection point, you'll need to coordinate with medical personnel." "Where are you going?" Martinez asked, her voice betraying fear at the prospect of being left alone during the attack. Maria moved toward the kitchen's rear exit, the one that provided access to maintenance corridors running beneath the base's main buildings. Her knowledge of those passages came from 8 years of studying facility layouts, tactical approaches, and emergency procedures that had kept her alive in hostile territory. But she couldn't explain that background without revealing military experience that went far beyond food service. "I'm going to try to establish communication with whoever's coordinating our defense," Maria said, which was true but incomplete. "This attack is too well planned to be random, and someone needs to provide intelligence about what we're really facing." As Maria disappeared into the maintenance corridors, her mind was already processing tactical possibilities that drew on skills she'd never used in a domestic context. The coordinates tattooed on her arm represented locations where she'd called in close air support, coordinated with special operations teams, and gathered intelligence under conditions far more dangerous than anything Fort Blackstone had ever experienced. The narrow passages beneath the base were dark, cramped, and filled with the mechanical hum of ventilation systems that continued operating despite the power failures above. Maria moved through the maze-like environment with confidence. Born from similar navigation through cave systems and underground facilities in Afghanistan, her muscle memory adapting quickly to the familiar challenge of tactical movement in confined spaces. Her destination was the base's secondary communication facility, a backup installation that most personnel didn't know existed. If the primary command post had been compromised, the backup facility might still be operational, providing an opportunity to establish contact with external support and gather intelligence about the attacking force's true capabilities and objectives. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. It really helps the channel grow. But as Maria navigated toward her objective, she was beginning to suspect that the real threat to Fort Blackstone wasn't just the assault teams currently engaged in firefights across the installation. The level of inside knowledge displayed by the attackers suggested a conspiracy that went far beyond external enemies, involving people who had legitimate access to the base's most sensitive security information. The thought that American military personnel might be actively supporting an attack on their own installation filled Maria with cold rage. She'd seen corruption and betrayal in Afghanistan, but those situations involved foreign nationals in a war zone. The possibility that similar betrayal was occurring on American soil represented a violation of everything she'd spent 8 years defending. As explosions continued to echo through the base above her, Maria moved through the darkness toward a confrontation that would require skills her current assignment had never acknowledged. The mess hall cook was about to become something much more dangerous, whether Fort Blackstone's defenders realized it or not. The secondary communication facility was buried 3 levels beneath Fort Blackstone's main hospital, accessible only through maintenance corridors that required security clearance most base personnel didn't possess. Maria's knowledge of its location came from detailed facility studies she'd conducted during her first week at the base, a habit developed through years of operations where understanding alternative communication routes could mean the difference between successful mission completion and catastrophic failure. The access panel required a security code that Maria shouldn't have known, but her background in special operations had included training on bypassing standard military security systems. Within 47 seconds, she'd gained entry to a cramped room filled with communication equipment that represented Fort Blackstone's last connection to the outside world if primary systems failed. Staff Sergeant Coleman, the communication specialist on duty, spun around with his sidearm drawn as Maria entered the facility. His face showed the stress of someone who'd been monitoring disaster unfold across multiple frequencies while being unable to provide effective coordination for the base's defensive response. "Who the hell are you?" Coleman demanded, his weapon trained on Maria's center mass. "This is a restricted facility. How did you get access to these corridors?" "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Mess Hall Operations," Maria replied calmly, keeping her hands visible while assessing Coleman's tactical readiness and the communication equipment's operational status. "I'm here because our primary communications are compromised and we need to establish contact with external support." Coleman's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. "Mess hall operations? What's a cook doing in a classified communication facility during a combat situation?" The question highlighted the fundamental problem Maria faced throughout her assignment at Fort Blackstone. Her current role created assumptions about her capabilities that had nothing to do with her actual qualifications. Coleman was reacting to her job description rather than her demonstrated competence under pressure, a dynamic that had frustrated her for months, but was now potentially fatal for everyone on the base. "Because," Maria said with careful precision, "I have experience with tactical communications from previous assignments, And right now experience matters more than job descriptions. Coleman lowered his weapon slightly but maintained a defensive posture. Previous assignments? Your personnel file shows food service training and no combat experience. What kind of communications experience are you talking about? Maria felt the familiar frustration of having her background dismissed by someone whose security clearance didn't include access to classified operational records. Her service with the 82nd Airborne as a forward observer was documented in files that remained sealed due to the sensitive nature of operations she'd supported, making her expertise invisible to personnel who lacked appropriate clearance levels. The kind of experience that taught me to recognize when professional assault teams are using inside intelligence to coordinate attacks on American military installations, Maria replied, moving toward the communication console despite Coleman's continued suspicion that the equipment confirmed her worst fears about Fort Blackstone's current situation. Primary communication circuits showed active interference patterns that indicated electronic warfare capabilities far beyond anything random terrorist groups possessed. Someone was using military-grade jamming equipment to isolate the base from external support while maintaining selective communication channels for their own coordination. Coleman, have you been able to establish contact with regional command? Maria asked while studying signal patterns that revealed sophisticated understanding of military communication protocols. Negative, Coleman replied, his professional training overriding personal suspicion as he focused on the tactical problem. Someone's jamming our primary frequencies, and backup channels keep getting compromised within minutes of activation. Whoever's doing this knows our communication procedures better than they should. Maria activated secondary analysis functions that Coleman apparently didn't know existed, revealing electronic signatures that made her blood run cold. The jamming patterns matched techniques she'd encountered in Afghanistan when fighting insurgent groups that had been trained and equipped by foreign intelligence services. But the precision of the current operation suggested direct involvement by people with legitimate access to American military communication systems. This isn't random jamming, Maria observed, pointing to waveform patterns displayed on the console. Someone's using selective interference to block our communications, while maintaining clear channels for their own operations. Look at these frequency gaps. They're coordinating through military communication equipment. Coleman studied the data with growing alarm. How do you know how to read these patterns? Communication analysis requires specialized training that isn't included in food service programs. Before Maria could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal classified background information, the facility's emergency communication system activated with an incoming transmission from an unexpected source. The signal was encrypted using protocols that Coleman's security clearance didn't include, but Maria recognized the authentication codes from operations she'd supported in Afghanistan. "This is Falcon 6 to any station Fort Blackstone," came a voice that carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to coordinating complex military operations under extreme pressure. "We have received reports of hostile activity at your location. Please respond with current tactical assessment and support requirements." Coleman reached for the communication controls, but Maria interceded with a gesture that stopped him without explanation. Something about the transmission troubled her. The timing was wrong. The protocols were outdated, and the authentication codes belonged to units that shouldn't have knowledge of Fort Blackstone's current situation. "Coleman, don't respond to that transmission," Maria said with quiet urgency. "The authentication codes are from operations that concluded 6 months ago. Someone's using old intelligence to fish for information about our current status." "What?" Coleman's confusion was evident. "How could you possibly know that?" "Those are classified authentication codes that require special operations clearance to recognize." Maria realized she'd revealed knowledge that her current assignment couldn't explain, but the tactical situation left no room for maintaining cover stories that could get people killed. Coleman's life and the lives of everyone on Fort Blackstone depended on someone recognizing that this attack involved far more than external assault teams. Because, Maria said with deliberate calm, I've used those codes in operations where getting them wrong meant people died. And right now, someone's trying to use expired codes to gather intelligence about our defensive capabilities. The admission hung in the air between them as Coleman processed implications that challenged everything he thought he knew about the woman who served food in the base's mess hall. His tactical training was sufficient to recognize that Maria's knowledge couldn't come from casual exposure to military communications, but her current assignment made no sense if she possessed the expertise she was demonstrating. Another transmission interrupted Coleman's confusion. Fort Blackstone. This is Falcon 6. Please respond immediately with base status and casualty reports. We are prepared to provide immediate support if you can confirm your identity and current situation. Maria moved to the communication console and activated analysis functions that revealed the transmission's true origin. The signal was coming from a location approximately 12 miles southeast of Fort Blackstone, an area that contained no legitimate military installations capable of providing tactical support. Someone was broadcasting from a position that suggested coordination with the assault teams currently attacking the base. Coleman, that transmission is coming from a location that puts the broadcaster in position to coordinate with the hostile forces currently on our base, Maria said while documenting the signal analysis for future reference. If we respond with tactical information, we'll be providing intelligence directly to our attackers. Coleman studied the data with growing comprehension and mounting horror. You're saying the people claiming to offer support are actually working with the assault teams? I'm saying this attack involves coordination between external assault forces and people with access to classified military communications, Maria replied while continuing to monitor electronic signatures that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy they were facing. The implications were staggering. Someone within the American military command structure was actively supporting an assault on Fort Blackstone, using legitimate access to communication protocols and facility intelligence to ensure the attack's success. The betrayal went far beyond simple security breaches. It represented active treason by people who had sworn oaths to defend American military installations. Coleman's radio crackled with another transmission. This one from Captain Thompson's voice. All support personnel, report to designated assembly areas immediately. Base security requires accountability of all non-combat personnel during this emergency situation. Maria's tactical instincts screamed warnings about Thompson's transmission. The timing was suspicious, coming just as she'd identified evidence of insider coordination with the attacking forces. Thompson's unusual interest in tracking support personnel suggested purposes that had nothing to do with legitimate security concerns. Coleman, do not acknowledge that transmission, Maria said with urgent authority. Thompson's trying to gather intelligence about personnel locations for reasons that aren't legitimate. Staff Sergeant, you're making serious accusations without providing any justification, Coleman replied, though his tone suggested growing uncertainty about the situation developing around them. Maria realized that protecting Fort Blackstone's defenders would require revealing capabilities that would end her carefully maintained cover as a simple mess hall cook. But the coordinates tattooed on her arm represented 8 years of operations where protecting American lives had been more important than protecting personal secrets. And that priority hadn't changed just because the battlefield was now domestic. Rather than foreign. Maria activated the communication console's advanced encryption protocols, her fingers moving across controls with the fluid confidence of someone who'd operated similar equipment under enemy fire. Coleman watched in stunned silence as she bypassed security lockouts that should have been impossible for support personnel to access, her actions revealing familiarity with classified systems that contradicted everything in her official personnel file. "Staff Sergeant, how are you doing that?" Coleman asked, his voice tight with confusion and growing respect. "Those are Special Operations Communication Protocols. You need crypto clearance to even know they exist." "Because I have crypto clearance," Maria replied while establishing a secure channel that would allow communication with legitimate external support without revealing their position to the hostile forces monitoring standard frequencies. "My clearance status isn't reflected in my current assignment records for operational security reasons." The encrypted channel connected with a facility that Coleman didn't recognize, bringing the calm voice of someone whose authority was immediately apparent. "This is Castle Base Operations. Authentication confirmed. Please provide current tactical assessment of situation at Fort Blackstone." Maria keyed the microphone with practiced efficiency. "Castle Base, this is Raven 37. Fort Blackstone is under coordinated assault by professional military forces with inside intelligence. Primary communications compromised, multiple security breaches. Estimated hostile force strength, between 30 and 50 personnel with military equipment." Coleman's eyes widened at Maria's use of call signs and terminology that belonged to classified operations rather than food service assignments. Her communication style indicated experience with tactical reporting that required years of specialized training and field operations under combat conditions. "Raven 37, Castle Base acknowledges. Please confirm your current location and status. We show no authorized personnel with your call sign at Fort Blackstone. Castle Base, Raven 37 is operating under administrative cover assignment. Authentication code Delta 74 Charlie 9. Maria transmitted, using classification codes that would verify her identity through channels Coleman couldn't access. The pause that followed suggested intense activity at Castle Base as personnel verified authentication codes that connected Maria to operations far beyond her current assignment. When the response came, the voice carried new authority and urgency that indicated her credentials had been confirmed through appropriate channels. "Raven 37, authentication confirmed. Your operational status has been activated effective immediately. Please provide detailed tactical assessment and support requirements." Coleman stared at Maria with complete bewilderment as the implications of the conversation became clear. The woman he'd known as a mess hall cook was communicating with classified military operations using authentication codes that required security clearances far above his own level. Her transformation from support personnel to operational asset was happening before his eyes with a speed that challenged his understanding of military organizational structures. "Castle Base, hostile forces demonstrate intimate knowledge of base layout, security procedures, and communication protocols," Maria continued, her voice carrying the professional precision of someone accustomed to providing critical intelligence under pressure. "Assessment indicates insider coordination with assault teams. Recommend immediate investigation of personnel with access to classified facility information." Raven 37 understood. "Counterintelligence teams are being deployed to your location. Can you maintain secure communications and provide tactical support for incoming response teams?" Maria checked the communication equipment's capabilities while calculating the tactical requirements for coordinating with external support teams operating in unfamiliar territory. Her experience in Afghanistan had included similar coordination challenges, where forward observers provided critical intelligence for air support and special operations units conducting precision missions in hostile environments. "Castle Base, affirmative. I can provide target identification, tactical coordination, and facility intelligence for response teams. Request priority air support for reconnaissance and close air support missions." Coleman listened to the exchange with growing amazement as Maria demonstrated capabilities that belonged to elite military specialists rather than support personnel. Her confident handling of tactical communication protocols indicated experience with operations that required the highest levels of training and security clearance. The communication facility's monitoring equipment detected incoming helicopter signatures approaching Fort Blackstone from multiple directions. Maria analyzed the flight patterns with professional interest, noting approach vectors that suggested coordination with ground forces, while avoiding areas where hostile fire could threaten aircraft conducting tactical insertions. Coleman, those are friendly aircraft approaching from the northwest, Maria observed while tracking multiple aviation assets through electronic signatures that painted a clear picture of developing tactical support. Special operations. Helicopters with electronic warfare capabilities that will neutralize the jamming systems the hostiles are using against us. How can you tell that from these displays? Coleman asked, studying readouts that appeared meaningless to his level of training. This equipment isn't designed for aircraft identification. Maria activated additional analysis functions that revealed detailed information about the approaching aircraft, including their specific mission capabilities and estimated arrival times. Her familiarity with the equipment's advanced features demonstrated experience that couldn't be acquired through casual exposure to communication systems. Because I've coordinated with similar aircraft during operations that required precision timing and tactical coordination, Maria replied while preparing to establish communication with the incoming support teams. The electronic signatures matched Special Operations aviation units equipped for counter-terrorism missions. The facility's emergency alarm system activated with new urgency as the approaching aircraft began their tactical insertion procedures. Maria coordinated with the flight leaders using communication protocols that Coleman didn't recognize, providing real-time intelligence about hostile positions and friendly force locations that would prevent fratricide during close-quarters combat. Operations. Alpha Team Leader. This is Raven 37. Be advised, hostile forces have established defensive positions in buildings 12, 15, and 23. Recommend approach from grid coordinates I'm transmitting now to avoid prepared ambush sites. Coleman watched Maria orchestrate tactical coordination with professional competence that contradicted everything he thought he knew about her background. Her transformation from dismissed support personnel to operational commander was occurring with a speed that suggested years of training and experience that had been hidden beneath her current assignment. The first Special Operations helicopter touched down in Fort Blackstone's central courtyard, its crew immediately establishing defensive positions while additional aircraft provided overhead cover. Maria maintained communication with multiple teams simultaneously, providing tactical intelligence that allowed precise coordination between air and ground forces operating in a complex urban environment. Bravo Team, hostile sniper position confirmed. In Building 18, 3rd floor, eastern exposure. Charlie Team has clear approach from the maintenance tunnel entrance I'm marking on your tactical display. Coleman realized he was witnessing someone who possessed expertise far beyond anything her personnel file suggested. Maria's confident coordination of tactical operations indicated experience with situations where mistakes resulted in casualties. Experience that belonged to elite military specialists rather than food service personnel. The communication equipment detected successful neutralization of the hostile jamming systems as Special Operations teams systematically eliminated enemy positions throughout Fort Blackstone. Maria tracked the tactical progress through multiple information sources, providing real-time updates to coordination teams that relied on her intelligence for mission success. Castle Base, this is Raven 37. Hostile jamming systems neutralized. Primary communications restored. Special Operations teams have achieved tactical superiority in Sectors 1 through 4. Estimated 15 minutes to complete base security. Outstanding work, Raven 37. Your tactical coordination has been exemplary. Prepare for debrief with counterintelligence teams regarding insider threat assessment. As the immediate tactical situation stabilized, Coleman looked at Maria. With new understanding of capabilities that her current assignment had completely concealed. The woman who served meals in the base's mess hall had just coordinated a counterterrorism operation with professional competence that indicated years of specialized training and combat experience. "Staff Sergeant," Coleman said with genuine respect, "I think I owe you an apology for questioning your qualifications." Maria began shutting down the communication systems as Fort Blackstone's security was restored through operations she'd helped coordinate. Her temporary return to operational status was ending as the immediate crisis resolved, but the experience had revealed capabilities that could no longer be hidden beneath her administrative cover assignment. "Coleman, what you witnessed here is classified at levels that require special handling," Maria said while securing equipment that contained records of her tactical coordination activities. "But I think it's safe to say that appearances don't always reflect reality." The coordinates tattooed on her arm had proven their relevance once again, connecting her to operations that saved lives through precise application of military expertise. But now she faced the challenge of returning to food service duties, while knowing that her true capabilities had been revealed to people who would inevitably ask questions about her background. The emergency briefing convened in Fort Blackstone's secure conference room at 0800 hours, 6 hours after the last hostile forces had been neutralized by special operations teams. Maria sat at a polished table surrounded by personnel whose security clearances far exceeded anything associated with food service operations, counterintelligence specialists, special operations commanders, and federal agents whose presence indicated that the previous night's attack had implications extending far beyond a single military installation. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer of the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, studied Maria with the intense focus of someone trying to reconcile conflicting information about a subject whose background defied easy categorization. Maria's personnel file showed food service training and administrative assignments, but her performance during the crisis had demonstrated capabilities that belonged to elite military specialists with years of combat experience. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Colonel Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to extracting truth from complicated situations. "Your actions last night prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. However, your demonstration of classified capabilities raises questions about your current assignment and operational background." Major Sullivan from Special Operations Command activated a briefing display that showed tactical analysis of the previous night's events. The data revealed coordination patterns that had allowed Maria to provide intelligence and tactical support that exceeded anything expected from support personnel during crisis situations. "The tactical coordination you provided was exceptional," Major Sullivan continued, "but it required knowledge of communication protocols, aircraft capabilities, and operational procedures that aren't included in standard military training. We need to understand how you acquired those skills." Maria recognized the delicate position she was in. Her actions had saved lives and prevented a serious security breach, but they'd also revealed capabilities that her cover assignment was designed to conceal. Years of classified operations had taught her to navigate situations where revealing too much information could compromise ongoing missions, while revealing too little could undermine trust with legitimate authorities. "My background includes forward observer training with the 82nd Airborne Division," Maria replied carefully, providing information that could be verified through official channels without revealing the full scope of operations she'd supported. 8 years of deployments in Afghanistan, conducting fire support coordination and tactical communication operations. Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division leaned forward with obvious interest. "Fire support coordination would explain your communication skills, but last night you demonstrated familiarity with special operations, procedures that aren't included in standard forward observer training." Where did you acquire knowledge of classified tactical protocols? The question touched on assignments that Maria couldn't discuss without appropriate authorization from agencies that didn't officially acknowledge her previous work. Her service record showed forward observer training, but the specialized operations she'd actually conducted were documented in files that required security clearances exceeding those held by most of the personnel questioning her. Some operations required coordination with specialized units conducting classified missions. Maria said, maintaining the careful balance between providing useful information and protecting operational security for missions that might still be active. The specific details would require confirmation through appropriate channels. Colonel Hayes consulted classified documents that apparently contained information about Maria's background that wasn't available through standard personnel records. Her expression suggested growing understanding of capabilities that Maria's current assignment had been designed to conceal for reasons that extended beyond routine administrative decisions. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I'm going to share information that requires special handling, Colonel Hayes said, activating security protocols that indicated the briefing was moving into classified territory. Your previous assignments included attachment to Task Force Ranger conducting special reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan. Is that correct? Maria felt relief at having her background officially acknowledged, even in the limited context of a counterintelligence briefing. Task Force Ranger had been one of several units she'd supported during operations that required forward observers with specialized training and security clearances that enabled coordination with classified missions. Yes, ma'am, Maria confirmed. 18 months attached to Task Force Ranger conducting reconnaissance and target identification missions in support of special operations. The admission transformed the atmosphere in the briefing room as personnel realized they were dealing with someone whose military experience far exceeded anything suggested by her current assignment. Task Force Ranger operations were classified at levels that required extensive background investigations and specialized training that positioned participants for continued involvement in sensitive missions. Agent Torres activated additional briefing materials that revealed intelligence about the previous night's attack that hadn't been available during the immediate tactical response. The data painted a disturbing picture of conspiracy and betrayal that extended far beyond the assault teams that had been neutralized by Special Operations Forces. The attack on Fort Blackstone was coordinated by a network that includes active military personnel, defense contractors, and foreign intelligence operatives, Torres explained, displaying communication intercepts and financial records that revealed the scope of the conspiracy. The intelligence they possessed about base security could only have come from someone with legitimate access to classified information. Major Sullivan expanded the briefing to include tactical analysis that revealed the true sophistication of the previous night's operation. The assault teams had demonstrated knowledge of security procedures, communication protocols, and facility layouts that indicated months of preparation, supported by detailed intelligence from insider sources. The coordination you disrupted last night was part of a larger operation designed to steal classified weapons technology and eliminate witnesses who could expose the theft. Sullivan continued. Your actions prevented the successful completion of their mission, but the network responsible for the attack remains active. Maria studied the intelligence displays with growing understanding of the conspiracy she'd inadvertently disrupted through her tactical coordination activities. The attack on Fort Blackstone had been designed to cover the theft of advanced weapons technology while eliminating personnel who possessed evidence about the network's previous operations. The weapons technology they were targeting is stored in classified facilities that require specialized security clearances to access, Colonel Hayes added. The theft would have provided hostile foreign governments with capabilities that could significantly compromise American military operations worldwide. Agent Torres activated a new display that showed the network structure and revealed connections that made Maria's blood run cold. The conspiracy included personnel at multiple military installations, defense contractors involved in weapons development, and foreign operatives who'd been coordinating the theft of American military technology for over 2 years. Captain Thompson, your logistics officer, was providing detailed intelligence about base operations to facilitate the theft, Torres revealed, displaying financial records that documented payments from foreign sources in exchange for classified information. His supply shortages were designed to create operational difficulties that would distract from security preparations. The revelation explained Thompson's incompetence and hostility toward Maria's attempts to address logistical problems through proper planning. His deliberate mismanagement had been intended to create chaos that would facilitate the conspiracy's operations while discrediting anyone who attempted to identify patterns that might reveal the underlying deception. The network has been systematically placing operatives in support roles at military installations where they could gather intelligence without attracting attention, Major Sullivan explained. Your current assignment was originally designed to position you for similar intelligence gathering, but your legitimate background created complications they hadn't anticipated. Maria realized that her assignment to Fort Blackstone hadn't been routine personnel management, but deliberate positioning by people who'd assumed her forward observer background would make her useful for gathering intelligence about base operations. The conspiracy had attempted to recruit her without understanding that her actual loyalties and capabilities would make her their most dangerous opponent. The question now, Colonel Hayes said, is whether you're willing to continue operating in an undercover capacity to help us identify and neutralize the remaining elements of this network. The offer represented an opportunity to return to operational status while serving the mission of protecting American military personnel from betrayal by their own comrades. Maria's experience with special operations had prepared her for missions that required operating in hostile environments, where distinguishing between friends and enemies required constant vigilance and professional competence. Ma'am, what would be the scope of the mission? Maria asked, recognizing that accepting the assignment would mean abandoning the relative safety of food service operations for the dangerous uncertainties of counterintelligence work. Agent Torres activated a final briefing display that revealed the network's suspected activities at installations across multiple states. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving theft of weapons technology, manipulation of supply chains, and coordination with foreign intelligence services that represented a direct threat to national security. The mission would involve maintaining your current cover assignment while gathering intelligence about network operations and identifying personnel who might be involved in continued theft activities, Torres explained. Your demonstrated capabilities and established presence make you ideally positioned for this work. Maria looked around the briefing room at personnel whose expertise and authority represented the highest levels of American military and intelligence operations. The coordinates tattooed on her arm had led her to this moment, where her hidden capabilities could serve a mission that protected the soldiers and installations she'd spent her career defending. I accept the mission, Maria said with quiet determination. 3 weeks after accepting her undercover assignment, Maria stood in the same briefing room where her true capabilities had first been revealed, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. The polished table was now covered with evidence that represented the systematic dismantling of a conspiracy that had threatened military installations across 6 states. Her patient work gathering intelligence while maintaining her cover as a mess hall cook had yielded results that exceeded everyone's expectations. General Patricia Morrison, the commanding officer of Army Counterintelligence, studied the comprehensive case files that documented Maria's undercover operations with obvious satisfaction. The evidence included recorded conversations, financial transactions, and communication intercepts that revealed the full scope of the network's activities information. that could only have been gathered by someone with Maria's unique combination of access and expertise. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, General Morrison began, her voice carrying the respect reserved for personnel who'd accomplished missions of exceptional difficulty and importance. Your work over the past 3 weeks has resulted in the identification and arrest of 17 network operatives, the recovery of stolen weapons technology valued at over $200 million, and the prevention of additional security breaches at 4 military installations. The assembled personnel included representatives from every agency involved in dismantling the conspiracy: FBI, counterterrorism specialists, Army Criminal Investigation Division officers, and Special Operations commanders whose units had conducted the arrest operations that Maria's intelligence had made possible. Their presence indicated the strategic importance of her contributions to an operation that had prevented serious damage to American national security. Colonel Hayes activated a briefing display that showed the network's complete organizational structure, revealed through Maria's systematic intelligence gathering and the subsequent investigations her work had enabled. The conspiracy had been far more extensive than anyone had initially suspected, involving coordinated theft operations at multiple installations and the compromise of classified technology that could have shifted military balances in hostile regions. The financial records you obtained showed payments totaling over $50 million to network operatives over a 2-year period. Colonel Hayes continued, displaying transaction data that revealed the scope of foreign investment in stealing American military technology. The recipients included active military personnel, defense contractors, and civilian employees with security clearances at installations across the country. Maria had spent 3 weeks maintaining her normal duties while conducting surveillance operations that required extraordinary care to avoid detection by network operatives who were actively monitoring for security threats. Her background in special operations had provided the skills necessary for gathering intelligence in hostile environments. But operating undercover among people who might recognize her capabilities had created unique challenges. Agent Torres from the FBI displayed photographs of arrested operatives whose activities Maria's intelligence had exposed. The arrests had been coordinated simultaneously across multiple locations to prevent network members from escaping or destroying evidence. Operations that required precise timing and comprehensive intelligence about each target's activities and security precautions. The communication intercepts you provided revealed coordination between network operatives and foreign intelligence services in 3 different countries, Torres explained, showing encrypted communications that documented the international scope of the conspiracy. Your work prevented the transfer of advanced missile guidance systems to hostile governments that could have used the technology against American forces overseas. Major Sullivan from Special Operations Command stood to address the assembled personnel with the formal bearing of someone delivering official recognition for exceptional service. His presentation included tactical analysis of operations that Maria's intelligence had enabled, demonstrating how her undercover work had directly contributed to mission success in ways that saved lives and protected national security. Staff Sergeant Vasquez's intelligence gathering enabled surgical strikes against network facilities that recovered stolen technology while minimizing risk to special operations personnel. Sullivan reported, displaying tactical footage from operations that had neutralized terrorist supply chains with precision that would have been impossible without detailed inside information. The evidence table contained physical items that represented the scope of Maria's accomplishments during her undercover assignment, communication devices used by network operatives, financial documents that revealed funding sources, and samples of stolen technology that had been recovered through raids based on her intelligence. Each item represented hours of careful surveillance and documentation, conducted while maintaining her cover as support personnel. General Morrison activated a secure communication system that connected the briefing room with senior officials whose Authorization was required for the recognition Maria's service had earned. The presence of personnel with flag-level authority indicated that her contributions were being acknowledged at the highest levels of military command and civilian leadership. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, General Morrison announced with formal authority. By direction of the Secretary of Defense and with the concurrence of the Director of National Intelligence, you are hereby awarded the Defense Superior Service Medal for exceptionally meritorious service in conducting counterintelligence operations that prevented serious damage to American national security interests. The medal presentation was conducted with full military ceremony, despite the classified nature of Maria's operations. Her service had earned recognition that acknowledged capabilities far beyond anything associated with food service operations, formally documenting achievements that had previously been hidden by operational security requirements and administrative cover assignments. Colonel Hayes presented additional recognition that reflected the multi-agency nature of Maria's contributions to dismantling the conspiracy. The FBI Director's Award for Excellence in Counterterrorism Operations acknowledged her intelligence-gathering work, while the Army's Intelligence Medal for Valor recognized her willingness to operate in dangerous circumstances where detection could have resulted in assassination by network operatives. Your work exemplifies the highest standards of military professionalism and personal courage, General Morrison continued, addressing Maria with the respect due to someone whose service had prevented serious threats to American military personnel worldwide. Your willingness to accept dangerous assignments and your exceptional competence in executing complex operations have saved lives and protected critical national security interests. The briefing room fell silent as General Morrison prepared to address the broader implications of Maria's service and the lessons her success had provided about identifying and utilizing hidden capabilities within military personnel. Her transformation from dismissed support personnel to recognized intelligence operative illustrated principles that extended far beyond individual recognition. This operation demonstrates the critical importance of recognizing that expertise and capability can exist in unexpected places, General Morrison observed, looking around the room at personnel whose preconceptions about support roles had been challenged by Maria's performance. Military effectiveness depends on identifying and utilizing all available talent, regardless of current assignments or conventional expectations. Agent Torres provided a final assessment of network activities that Maria's work had disrupted, emphasizing the continuing importance of vigilance against insider threats that could compromise military security through legitimate access to classified information. The conspiracy's sophistication had required comprehensive response capabilities that drew on expertise from multiple agencies and military specialties. The network's activities represented a fundamental threat to military operations worldwide, Torres concluded, and their neutralization required capabilities that combined tactical intelligence gathering, technical analysis, and strategic coordination. Staff Sergeant Vasquez's contribution was essential to achieving mission success. As the formal ceremony concluded, Maria found herself surrounded by personnel who had initially dismissed her as simply a mess hall cook, but now recognized her as someone whose capabilities had exceeded their assumptions in ways that saved lives and protected national security. The transformation represented vindication for years of service where her true contributions had been hidden by operational requirements and administrative assignments. Private Martinez, who had been invited to witness the recognition ceremony, approached Maria with obvious pride in someone whose mentorship had shaped her own understanding of military service and professional excellence. The young soldier's presence represented continuity between Maria's cover assignment and her revealed capabilities. Staff Sergeant Martinez said with genuine admiration, "I always knew there was something special about the way you approached problems, but I never imagined anything like this." The coordinates tattooed on Maria's arm had led her through 8 years of combat operations to this moment of recognition. where capabilities that had been hidden for operational security could finally be acknowledged by people whose authority to grant such recognition represented the highest levels of American military and intelligence operations. 2 days after the medal ceremony, Maria received orders that took her far from Fort Blackstone's familiar kitchen routines to a nondescript office building in Arlington, Virginia. The facility's unremarkable exterior concealed one of the Pentagon's most sensitive intelligence operations, a joint task force dedicated to investigating military-industrial corruption that threatened American national security on a scale that dwarfed the network she'd recently helped dismantle. Deputy Director Sarah Chun of the Defense Intelligence Agency greeted Maria in a conference room whose walls displayed classified intelligence that painted a disturbing picture of systematic compromise affecting military operations worldwide. The evidence revealed patterns of corruption, espionage, and betrayal that extended through multiple government agencies, defense contractors, and foreign intelligence services operating with coordination that suggested decades of careful planning. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Director Chun began activating security protocols that indicated the briefing would involve information classified at the highest levels of government. The network you helped neutralize at Fort Blackstone was one operational cell in a conspiracy that threatens the fundamental security of American military operations. What we're about to show you represents intelligence gathered over 5 years of investigation. The first display revealed financial transactions that totaled over $3 billion, representing payments from foreign governments to American personnel in exchange for classified military technology, operational intelligence, and strategic information that had compromised dozens of military operations. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, involving corruption that reached into every branch of the armed services and multiple civilian agencies responsible for national defense. General Robert Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Task Force, expanded the briefing to include tactical analysis that showed how stolen American technology had been used against American forces in conflicts around the world. The intelligence revealed that weapons systems developed at enormous cost by American research facilities had been systematically compromised and provided to hostile governments that used them to kill American soldiers. The conspiracy operates through a network of defense contractors, military personnel, and foreign operatives who've been coordinating the theft of American military technology for over 15 years, General Hayes explained, displaying organizational charts that revealed connections spanning multiple countries and involving hundreds of conspirators. Their operations have directly contributed to American casualties in Iraq, Afghanistan, and classified operations worldwide. Maria studied the intelligence with growing horror as she recognized the implications of systematic betrayal that had turned American military capabilities against the soldiers those capabilities were designed to protect. Her 8 years of combat experience provided context for understanding how stolen technology could be used to target American forces with their own weapons and tactics. Colonel Martinez from Army Criminal Investigation displayed intercepted communications that revealed the conspiracy's current activities and future plans. The intelligence showed that the network was preparing to execute their largest operation, yet the theft of classified research from Project Nightfall, a classified weapons development program that represented the most advanced military technology in American possession. Project Nightfall involves the development of autonomous weapon systems that could revolutionize military operations, Colonel Martinez explained, showing technical specifications that represented years of research and billions of dollars in development costs. If this technology reaches hostile governments, it could shift military balances worldwide and create threats that current defensive systems couldn't counter. Agent Rebecca Sullivan from the CIA provided intelligence about foreign involvement in the conspiracy that revealed coordination between hostile intelligence services and American operatives willing to sell classified information for financial gain. The evidence showed systematic recruitment of American personnel through financial incentives, blackmail, and ideological manipulation that had created a network of traitors operating at the highest levels of government. The foreign services involved include intelligence agencies from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, Sullivan reported, displaying evidence of coordination that had enabled systematic theft of American military secrets. Their coordination indicates a level of strategic planning that treats the corruption of American personnel as a primary intelligence objective rather than opportunistic recruitment. Director Chun activated additional displays that revealed the true scope of Maria's importance to dismantling the conspiracy. Her unique combination of combat experience, intelligence training, and administrative cover had positioned her to gather information that traditional investigation methods couldn't access, making her capabilities essential for operations that required infiltrating networks that had spent years developing security against conventional law enforcement approaches. Your work at Fort Blackstone demonstrated capabilities that we need for operations targeting the conspiracy's leadership. Director Chun continued, outlining assignment possibilities that would require Maria to operate undercover in environments far more dangerous than military installations. The network's sophisticated security makes traditional investigation methods ineffective, but your background provides access opportunities that could expose their command structure. The briefing revealed that Maria's successful intelligence gathering at Fort Blackstone had been noticed by the conspiracy's leadership, creating both opportunities and dangers for continued undercover operations. Network security personnel were actively investigating how their Fort Blackstone cell had been compromised, making any future assignment a high-risk operation that could result in assassination if her cover was discovered. General Hayes presented mission parameters that would require Maria to infiltrate Meridian Defense Systems, the defense contractor that served as the conspiracy's primary coordination center for technology, theft and distribution to foreign governments. The assignment would position her to gather intelligence about Project Nightfall's security while identifying network operatives responsible for coordinating the theft operation. Meridian Defense employs over 12,000 personnel across 15 facilities, Hayes explained, showing facility layouts and organizational charts that revealed the complexity of infiltrating a major defense contractor. Their security systems are designed to prevent exactly the kind of intelligence gathering we need, but your military background provides credible justification for seeking employment in their logistics operations. Agent Sullivan provided intelligence about Meridian's internal security that revealed sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities designed to identify and eliminate threats to their operations. The company employed former intelligence operatives and military specialists whose job was preventing exactly the kind of infiltration that Maria's mission would require. Meridian security personnel include former CIA operatives, military intelligence specialists, and foreign nationals whose loyalty to American interests is questionable, Sullivan warned, displaying personnel files that revealed the caliber of opposition Maria would face during undercover operations. Detection would likely result in elimination rather than arrest, making this assignment extremely dangerous. Director Chun presented the strategic importance of the mission in terms that emphasized how Maria's unique capabilities could prevent a catastrophic breach of American national security. Project Nightfall represented technological advantages that could protect American forces for decades, but only if the conspiracy could be prevented from stealing and distributing the classified research to hostile governments. The intelligence you could gather about Meridian's operations would enable surgical strikes against the conspiracy's leadership while recovering stolen technology that represents decades of American research and development. Chun explained, showing tactical plans that required precise intelligence about facility security and personnel movements. Your work could prevent technological advantages worth hundreds of billions of dollars from reaching hostile governments. The Mission briefing concluded with recognition that Maria's decision would affect not just her own career, but the broader security of American military operations worldwide. The conspiracy she'd helped expose at Fort Blackstone represented just one aspect of a threat that could compromise American military superiority for generations if not addressed through operations that required capabilities like those she'd demonstrated. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, General Hayes said with formal gravity, "This mission represents the most important counterintelligence operation currently being conducted by American agencies. Your participation could prevent a catastrophic compromise of American national security, but it would require accepting risks that exceed anything in your previous military service." Maria looked around the briefing room at personnel whose authority represented the highest levels of American military and intelligence leadership. The coordinates tattooed on her arm had led her through combat operations in Afghanistan to intelligence gathering at Fort Blackstone, and now to a mission that could protect American soldiers worldwide from threats created by their own countrymen's betrayal. The weight of the decision pressed against her understanding of military service and personal obligation to protect American lives through whatever means necessary. Accepting the mission would mean abandoning the relative safety of revealed identity for the extreme dangers of deep undercover work in an environment where discovery meant death. Maria's transformation from dismissed mess hall cook to elite counterintelligence operative was complete as she walked through the doors of Meridian Defense Systems 6 weeks later, carrying fabricated credentials that identified her as a logistics specialist with 8 years of military experience. Her cover identity was perfect, close enough to her real background to withstand scrutiny, but sanitized of any connections to special operations or intelligence work that might trigger security concerns. The Meridian facility sprawled across 200 acres of Virginia countryside, its modern glass buildings concealing research laboratories where America's most advanced weapons technology was being developed alongside systematic theft operations that funneled classified information to hostile foreign governments. Maria's assignment was to penetrate the conspiracy's inner circle while gathering intelligence about Project Nightfall's security vulnerabilities. Dr. Marcus Webb, Meridian's chief technology officer and the conspiracy's operational coordinator, personally conducted Maria's orientation tour through facilities that contained enough classified research to revolutionize military capabilities worldwide. His friendly demeanor concealed the calculated assessment of someone evaluating a potential asset for recruitment into operations that represented the largest technology theft in American history. Ms. Rodriguez, Webb said, using Maria's cover identity as they walked past laboratories where scientists worked on autonomous weapons systems worth billions of dollars. Your military logistics background makes you ideally suited for coordinating the special projects that represent our most important work. I think you'll find the opportunities here quite remarkable. The subtle emphasis on special projects indicated Webb's interest in recruiting Maria for activities that went far beyond legitimate defense contracting. Her military background and security clearance made her valuable for operations that required access to classified information, exactly the profile the conspiracy sought for expanding their theft capabilities. Maria's temporary office overlooked the facility's central courtyard, where she could observe personnel movements and identify individuals whose behavior patterns suggested involvement in clandestine activities. Her experience in Afghanistan had taught her to recognize the subtle signs that marked people engaged in operations requiring exceptional security consciousness and careful coordination with external contacts. Within her first week, Maria identified 7 Meridian employees whose communication patterns and security behavior indicated involvement in activities beyond their official responsibilities. The evidence included encrypted communications, unusual travel schedules, and financial transactions that suggested payment from sources not connected to legitimate defense contracting work. Her tactical training enabled her to conduct surveillance operations while maintaining her cover as a new employee learning company procedures. The skills that had kept her alive during forward observer missions in hostile territory proved equally valuable for gathering intelligence in corporate environments where detection could result in assassination by operatives trained to eliminate security threats. Agent Torres, operating under her own cover identity as a Meridian security consultant, maintained contact with Maria through communication methods that appeared to be routine corporate interactions, but actually transmitted critical intelligence about conspiracy activities. Their coordination required extraordinary care to avoid detection by security personnel, specifically trained to identify law enforcement infiltration. The Project Nightfall research is stored in Building 7's classified section, Torres reported. During a seemingly casual conversation about corporate security procedures, Webb has been photographing technical specifications for transmission to foreign contacts, but the operation requires access codes that only senior research personnel possess. Maria's investigation revealed that Webb was coordinating with foreign operatives who planned to steal Project Nightfall's complete research database during a carefully orchestrated security breach scheduled for the following month. The operation would provide hostile governments with autonomous weapons technology that could neutralize American military advantages for decades. The conspiracy's sophistication exceeded anything Maria had encountered during her previous assignments. Webb's network included current and former intelligence operatives, military personnel with access to classified facilities, and foreign agents whose coordination indicated years of careful planning and resource investment in compromising American national security. Her daily reports to the Joint Task Force revealed patterns of activity that painted a disturbing picture of systematic betrayal reaching into every aspect of American defense research and development. The conspiracy had infiltrated weapons development programs, intelligence agencies, and military command structures with coordination that suggested strategic planning by hostile foreign governments. 3 weeks into her assignment, Maria received intelligence that made her blood run cold. Webb had identified her as a potential security threat and was planning to eliminate her through methods that would appear to be an industrial accident. Her cover identity was beginning to unravel under scrutiny from security professionals, whose job was preventing exactly the kind of infiltration she was conducting. The coordinates tattooed on her arm seemed to pulse with urgency as Maria realized she was operating in the most dangerous environment of her military career. Unlike Afghanistan, where enemies were clearly identified and rules of engagement provided guidance for responding to threats, her current mission required navigating betrayal by people who possessed legitimate authority and resources for eliminating anyone who threatened their operations. Agent Torres transmitted an emergency signal that indicated immediate extraction might be necessary to prevent Maria's assassination by conspiracy operatives who had detected patterns in her behavior that suggested law enforcement training. The mission was reaching a critical point where continued infiltration could provide the intelligence needed to dismantle the conspiracy completely, but only if Maria could survive long enough to gather the evidence. Maria's phone received a text message that appeared to be routine corporate communication, but actually contained Webb's invitation to a private meeting where he would either attempt to recruit her for conspiracy operations or eliminate her as a security threat. The message represented the moment when her undercover assignment would succeed spectacularly or end in her death. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job or appearance? Share your story in the comments below. Maria's journey from dismissed cook to elite operative proves that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed watching this incredible transformation and want to see more stories about ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss our next episode where we'll reveal whether Maria survives her most dangerous mission yet. Like this video if you're rooting for the undercover hero. and let us know what would you do in Maria's situation.